When Jim Jordan leaned back in his chair that afternoon, the chamber's air was already heavy. He had the confidence of a man who had interrupted, browbeaten, and blustered his way through countless hearings before. The smirk across his face told everyone watching that he believed this would be no different. Another opportunity to raise his voice, wave his hands, and overwhelm his opponent with sheer aggression. But what Jim Jordan did not expect was Jasmine Crockett, sitting calmly across from him, her composure sharpening like steel against arrogance. The cameras captured the moment his words began tumbling out. His tone was quick, almost dismissive, and laced with the authority he thought came from repetition. He spoke as if the law was a tool he could bend, as if facts could be rearranged with enough bluster. For a moment, the chamber seemed to tilt toward him, his allies nodding, some laughing under their breath, eager to see him corner another Democrat. The sound of his voice bounced off the walls, the same cadence his supporters had memorized from rallies and interviews. He was certain this would be yet another display of dominance. But then Jasmine Crockett leaned forward. Not hurried, not defensive. Her movements were deliberate, like a skilled musician ready to play the first note of a symphony. Her eyes locked on Jordan, not with anger, but with the patience of someone who understood the weight of the moment. The stillness in her body contrasted so sharply with his flailing hands and raised pitch that even before she spoke, the balance of power in the room shifted. It was as if everyone suddenly realized this would not be one of Jim Jordan's usual victories. This time he was about to be outmatched. She began not with volume, but with clarity. Her words cut through his barrage like glass through fabric, precise and undeniable. "Congressman," she said, her voice steady enough to silence even the side murmurs, "if you are going to invoke the law, then let us speak of it accurately." The sentence was simple, but it landed with the weight of a gavel striking wood. The room paused. For the first time, Jordan blinked, his rhythm interrupted. The audience could feel it. His certainty had cracked. Jasmine did not rush. She explained step by step the legal framework that Jordan had tried to distort. Each line from her was deliberate, constructed like a case being presented in court. She referenced precedent, constitutional limits, and the basic principles that even first-year law students understood. And with each point, Jordan's interruptions sounded less like authority and more like desperation. The contrast was glaring. His bluster against her calm, his volume against her precision, his ignorance against her mastery. The chamber grew quieter with every word she spoke. Some members leaned in closer, sensing that history was unfolding in real time. Others avoided eye contact, uncomfortable with the unraveling of one of their own. Viewers watching live on television and online began flooding comment sections. "She's dismantling him. Jordan looks lost. This is embarrassing." The tide had turned not through shouting, but through intellect. Jordan tried to regain ground. He raised his voice again, cutting across her sentence. But the more he barked, the smaller he seemed. The once commanding sound now came across as shrill, like static interrupting a broadcast. And every time he lunged forward with another interruption, Jasmine's response was the same, measured, grounded, tethered to fact. It was as if she had rehearsed for this very duel, though the truth was simpler. She didn't need rehearsal, because truth requires no rehearsal. Then came the moment that would be replayed across social media for days, weeks, perhaps years. Jasmine paused, pulled out a folder of documents, and began citing chapter and verse from statutes Jordan had misrepresented. Her voice never wavered. She showed, line by line, that the very arguments Jordan had thrown into the air collapsed under the weight of reality. And when she finished her explanation, she did not gloat. She simply let the silence linger. That silence was more deafening than any shout. The camera captured Jordan leaning back, his lips tightening, eyes darting toward his aides as if searching for an escape route. But there was none. He had walked into the arena expecting to dominate, only to find himself standing unarmed against someone who had mastered the ground beneath her feet. The reaction was instant. On TikTok, clips of the exchange spread like wildfire, often set to dramatic music. On Twitter, hashtags praising Crockett trended above the day's news cycle. Memes compared Jordan's red-faced frustration to a student who had not done the reading, caught fumbling by the professor. And on YouTube, commentators dissected the encounter frame by frame, pointing out the exact second Jordan realized he had been cornered. But beyond the viral moments, something deeper resonated. Viewers who had long grown weary of political shouting matches saw in Jasmine Crockett something different. Proof that composure, intelligence, and respect for the law could not only survive in Washington, but triumph. It was a reminder that dignity could silence arrogance, that facts could outshine noise. For those who had dismissed her as another new voice without staying power, this moment was transformative. She was no longer just a name in the headlines. She had become a figure of credibility, a defender of law over spectacle. And for Jim Jordan, the cost was humiliation. His strategy of overwhelming opponents with interruptions and volume had failed in the most public, undeniable way. The story spread because it tapped into something larger than the clash of two lawmakers. It spoke to every teacher who had silenced a disruptive student with quiet authority, to every professional who had faced condescension and proven their worth with competence, to every person who had been underestimated because of gender, race, or background, only to rise and reveal undeniable strength. Jasmine Crockett's calm dismantling of Jim Jordan became a parable, the triumph of knowledge over arrogance, the victory of truth over distortion, and as the chamber returned to its regular proceedings, the echo of that silence remained. Jordan shuffled his papers, muttered under his breath, but nothing he said after that carried weight. The moment had passed, and everyone knew who had won. Outside the walls of Congress, the story was just beginning to ripple. Editorials praised her precision. Scholars highlighted her legal accuracy. Veterans of countless hearings remarked they had rarely seen someone expose ignorance so effectively and so publicly. The public didn't just watch a clash, they witnessed a shift in power, a rare instance when arrogance was not rewarded but checked, dissected, and dismantled. By nightfall, the narrative was cemented. Jim Jordan had been silenced, not by force, but by the undeniable strength of truth. And Jasmine Crockett had not only defended herself, she had elevated the standard of discourse. For millions watching, it was more than a viral clip. It was a reminder that in a world often dominated by noise, silence, the silence of a silenced opponent, the silence after truth is spoken, can be the loudest sound of all. To understand why Jasmine Crockett's words cut so deeply, you have to understand the man she faced. Jim Jordan has built his career on noise. His reputation, carefully polished over years in the House, rests not on legal expertise or legislative accomplishments, but on his ability to dominate the stage through volume and aggression. His method is simple: overwhelm the opponent, flood the exchange with interruptions, and substitute shouting for substance. For many of his supporters, this performance reads as strength. But on that day, before a national audience, Jordan's signature style was stripped bare. It wasn't the first time he had used bluster as a weapon. He had done it in hearings on impeachment, on oversight, on countless investigations. Time and again, he leaned on the same tactics: fast-talking dismissals, interruptions designed to throw opponents off balance, and fiery rhetoric meant to rouse headlines. He thrived in chaos, using the spectacle to claim victory even when his arguments lacked foundation. And until that moment, it had often worked. Opponents, caught between responding to substance and defending against noise, would stumble. The headline would favor Jordan. The clip would go viral in his circles. The myth of dominance would grow. But Jasmine Crockett represented a different kind of challenge. She wasn't just another target of his fury. She was an attorney. Her training was not in theater, but in the law. She had spent her career immersed in statutes, precedents, and courtroom battles where accuracy wasn't optional. For her, words weren't weapons of noise. They were instruments of precision. And when she spoke not as a politician scrambling to counter bluster, but as a lawyer dismantling a case. That difference was fatal to Jordan's strategy. The chamber felt that difference immediately. Where Jordan relied on emotional crescendos, Crockett relied on clarity. Where he aimed for intimidation, she leaned on patience. He swung wildly. She struck surgically. The contrast was so stark it felt theatrical, as though the room itself had become a stage where two archetypes battled, the noisy showman and the measured truth-teller. Viewers at home saw more than just political theater. They saw a mirror held up to American discourse itself. In a culture saturated with shouting matches, cable news interruptions, and viral rants, Crockett's composure was revolutionary. She didn't try to out-yell Jordan. She showed that yelling wasn't necessary. By refusing to meet noise with noise, she revealed it for what it was, emptiness. And that emptiness became painfully obvious as Jordan tried to recover. He raised his voice, accused, deflected, but his words landed hollow. The more he fought, the deeper the contrast grew. Every desperate interruption highlighted her calm. Every exaggerated claim made her precision glow brighter. It was not just a loss. It was exposure. His brand of politics, reliant on theater, crumbled when faced with substance. For Jasmine Crockett, this was not merely a performance. It was personal history meeting public duty. She had not come from privilege or a long political dynasty. She had come from the grind of education, from the relentless training of the courtroom, from communities where words mattered because lives depended on them. Her presence in that chamber was already a testament to perseverance. But when she faced Jim Jordan, she carried with her something more. The weight of every underestimated voice that had been drowned out by louder, emptier ones. That weight gave her strength, but it also gave the moment resonance. Because everyone watching, whether they were lawyers, teachers, nurses, or workers who had sat through condescending meetings, recognized themselves in her composure. They saw the struggle of trying to be heard in rooms dominated by noise. They saw the courage it takes to stay calm when every tactic is designed to provoke. They saw that dignity can win, and the media could not look away. The clips of the exchange ricocheted across platforms. But what made them powerful wasn't just the drama of Jordan's silencing. It was the symbolic meaning attached to it. Commentators framed it as a generational shift, the collapse of performative politics in the face of expertise. Columnists wrote about the return of seriousness to congressional hearings. Even late-night hosts who thrive on comedy admitted there was something almost cinematic about watching arrogance implode against competence. But the significance wasn't just symbolic. It had practical consequences. Jordan's credibility on legal issues, already shaky among serious observers, took another blow. For Crockett, the moment became a calling card, a demonstration that she could not only hold her own in heated political arenas, but dominate with substance. The clip wasn't just entertainment. It was evidence. Evidence that the tides of political debate could shift. And beneath it all was the lesson no one could ignore. Noise has limits. For years, figures like Jordan had thrived because opponents played by his rules. They tried to match intensity with intensity, interruption with interruption, volume with volume. But Crockett broke the pattern. She rewrote the rules. Instead of mirroring his chaos, She let it collapse under its own weight. Her calm was not passivity. It was strategy. By choosing not to be baited, she revealed the bait. By choosing not to shout, she made shouting look absurd. That strategy wasn't just effective in the chamber. It was effective for the nation watching. In living rooms, on phones, in offices where the clip played on loop, people felt the power of restraint. They realized that calm is not weakness. It is discipline. That precision is not dull. It is devastating. And that dignity in the right hands can silence even the loudest opponent. Of course, Jordan's allies scrambled to spin the moment. They claimed bias, accused Crockett of grandstanding, insisted that the law was on Jordan's side. But the footage told a different story. No spin could erase the image of Jordan leaning back, silenced. No talking points could erase the sound of silence that followed Crockett's dismantling. The truth was too clear, too undeniable, and so the moment lingered, not just as a viral clip, but as a cultural touchstone. It entered conversations in classrooms where teachers used it to show the difference between rhetoric and reason. It surfaced in corporate trainings, cited as an example of how to manage conflict with composure. It was shared in community groups as inspiration, proof that arrogance can be defeated without adopting arrogance. For Jasmine Crockett, it was more than vindication. It was empowerment. She had not just defended herself against a powerful opponent. She had shown millions how to face down bluster in their own lives. Her words had carried further than the chamber walls. They had entered the bloodstream of public discourse, a reminder that truth, delivered with precision, is still the most potent weapon in politics and in life. As the days passed, the clip didn't fade. It spread further, reaching audiences far beyond the political insiders who usually track committee hearings. High school students shared it on Snapchat, framing it as a masterclass in how to stand firm against arrogance. Law professors dissected it in classrooms, highlighting Crockett's ability to cite the law with clarity under pressure. Even faith leaders referenced it in sermons, drawing parallels between her poise and timeless lessons about humility, overcoming pride. What had begun as a heated exchange in Washington had transformed into a cultural parable. The reason was simple. People are hungry for authenticity. In a world where politics often feels like a never-ending shouting match, Jasmine Crockett gave people something rare, a reminder that truth, calmly spoken, still has power. Her silence in the face of Jordan's interruptions spoke louder than his tirades. Her reliance on facts showed that law and reason could withstand distortion, and her composure embodied a kind of strength that millions recognized, even if they had never heard her name before that day. For Jim Jordan, the humiliation was not just personal. It was symbolic. His entire brand depends on the illusion of dominance. To be silenced so publicly, so decisively by a freshman Democrat armed with nothing more than the law itself was a crack in the facade. His supporters may have tried to spin it, but the internet remembers differently. The memes, the captions, the headlines, all of them immortalized the moment when the noise finally met its match. But for Jasmine Crockett, the story was not about Jordan at all. It was about the people watching. It was about showing them that strength does not always roar, that knowledge can dismantle ignorance, and that patience can outlast provocation. Her victory was not just in silencing one congressman. It was in inspiring millions to believe that dignity still has a place in public life, and that is why the clip endures. Because it is more than politics. It is more than left versus right, Democrat versus Republican. It is a universal lesson about human interaction. It is the teacher outlasting the bully in the classroom. It is the worker correcting the boss who underestimated them. It is every quiet voice that has ever been dismissed, rising and proving that truth does not need to shout. So when the history of this Congress is written, the moment may not fill entire chapters. But for those who saw it, Live, in clips, in retellings, it will remain unforgettable. The day Jim Jordan was silenced wasn't just about him. It was about what happens when arrogance collides with dignity, when noise collides with truth, when bluster collides with law. And on that day, before the eyes of the nation, Jasmine Crockett showed us all that the loudest voice in the room is not always the strongest. Sometimes the strongest voice is the one that speaks last, calmly, and leaves the room in silence.